What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another 60 feet 6 inches, your fantasy baseball home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. With me from across the pond, it's Ben Rolfe. Ben, it's not even February yet, and we're talking fantasy baseball. How awesome is this?
Well, fantasy football's over. I don't know about you, but I don't really follow hockey, and definitely don't play fantasy hockey. I don't really follow a huge amount of basketball or fantasy basketball, so it's natural to jump onto this now. Football's kind of down to a couple of days a week kind of interest now, and it's time to start focusing on something. I've been hard at work getting those spreadsheets ready. My hitters projections are pretty much there. I just need to do that little bit of fine tinkering now that will just finalize those rankings, and I'm well on the way to having some pitcher projections. So it's that time of year. I've got a draft starting in 2 weeks' time, a slow draft starting the day after the Super Bowl. It's a tradition.
Crazy.
We love it. It's great. Usually, half the guys you've drafted are out by the time you actually get there. You'll have heard on this podcast, if you're a regular listener, me talk about my teams of death. Usually, we've drafted these guys, and by the time we finish the draft, your first or second round pick has got injured and is out for the year.
Oh boy. I'm actually in a fantasy hockey league and a couple fantasy basketball leagues because, well, I love fantasy sports and I need something to fill the gaps. But I'm with you. It's mainly fantasy football and fantasy baseball for me. Um, as you may notice, our other co-host Damien Dabrowski is not here. He will not be a main co-host on this show this year, unfortunately. He's moved on to brighter pastures. He has joined ESPN, doing fantasy work there. He's working on Matthew Berry's show. We're really excited for him. He will be on the show from time to time, hopefully, and we can wrangle him in every once in a while. But unfortunately, on a consistent basis, he will not be here. But like I said, we're pumped for him. So just wanted to give you that quick note first. As you can see, Ben is rocking his Tom Brady jersey. He's obviously ready for Sunday's game versus the Jaguars. He seems rather level-headed, talking pregame or talking pre-show, so that's good. I think it'll definitely be an interesting game. I'm kind of optimistic that tomorrow's games can, as weird as they are with Case Keenum and Blake Bortles and Nick Foles. I'm hoping for two really good games.
Yeah, as I said to you, it's kind of a no-lose situation for us UK-based Patriots fans, because if the Patriots lose, we get to watch our very own London Jacksonville Jaguars in the Super Bowl. So it's kind of exciting either way. It's a cool story. We get to see the Jags next year, and it would be amazing to get to go and watch a team that played in the Super Bowl. But obviously, I want the Patriots to win. It will take me a few days to recover if they don't. I can promise you that.
What was I going to say? Oh, my brain. Sorry, folks. My brain just stopped working. Um, but obviously, we're not here to talk football, Ben. Let's talk some baseball. So what I want to make sure people know is up on Fake Pigskin right now, Ben is releasing his early rankings. It's just a, kind of snapshot into his projections. And so, Ben, kind of give our listeners an idea of what you're doing with your projections, and then so how you build your rankings.
So my projections are built really based on previous 3 years' numbers. Now, obviously, that means that you've got a lot of bias in the fact that when you've got young players, if they've had half seasons that are particularly good or particularly bad, that can really influence it if they've not played for a full 3 seasons. So there's a little bit more to it than that. And generally, what I do at this stage of the year is I'm just getting the numbers right. I'm just trying to make sure that everything's working. The rankings are that I put out are not quite the final ones. I mean, you're not going to see anyone jump from like outside of my top 20 up to my number 2 or 3. That's so unlikely, and unless it's like a free agent signing or something. But
Yeah.
what I'll now do is I'll go back through and I'll just say, all right. So Paul De Jong was a huge example that was brought up to me this week. Shortstop. I looked at him in my projections, and my projections had him really good. And in my head, I just assumed that must be based off like a 40-game sample size. So I knocked him a bit down the rankings. And it was only when someone commented saying, like, why so down on him, that I actually realized he played 100-plus games last year. And that's kind of where I am now. I'm going back through. It's names like that. So your established guys like your Mike Trouts, your Bryce Harpers, they're not going to move very much because I know my numbers are built in 3 years. They cover their stretches and their slumps and their hot periods. It's the guys like your De Jongs, your young guys, your guys that maybe haven't been good for a season and a half, but then had a good end to 2017 that I've got to go back and look at. So
Yeah.
what I've been doing these last 2 weeks is just putting out top 20s for catcher, first base, second base, third base, and shortstop, and then a top 60 for outfield. They're just to kind of give you ideas. At this stage of the year, you're probably just locking in keepers. You're probably not actively starting drafts, and if you are, they're probably slow drafts. So you're only really focusing on the top end of those rankings. So the idea is that the top end of those rankings won't move a huge amount. Guys will generally stay within their tiers. Some guys might jump from like tier 2 to tier 1 or vice versa, but the top 10 of each of those should be fairly locked in, like I say, barring any major free agent signings and people going to great situations. But it's lower down the rankings that things will change. But I would guess at this stage of the year, unless you're in really deep leagues, you're not looking so much at those stages. So what I would do is if I'm looking at rankings right now, I'm not looking so much at the rankings. I'm looking at who people are near, especially if, for example, myself and other fantasy analysts, we do tiers. I'd look more at the tier that players are in right now rather than the ranks. If you're really stuck and you're looking at two guys in tier 4 and you're not sure, then you can look at my ranking by all means to make a decision. But if you're choosing between a guy in tier 3 and a guy in tier 4, it's always going to be the tier 3 guy for me. So it's not so much the rankings at this stage of the year, it's the tiers. And that's just what my projections help me do. I use the numbers, I have a look, and then I'll try and I'll have it. I won't do it all on numbers. I'll look at situations because obviously things change, players move, and that's what we're here to talk about today: movement of players, really. So
Absolutely, and that's what we'll be doing. Talking AL free agency moves today, trades, all that good stuff. We'll also be following this up with an NL version, and then we'll be talking some remaining free agents, some guys that we think could be on the move, guys that haven't been signed yet, what potential homes and what it could mean for their fantasy value. So make sure you check all those out, as well as we'll be back with team by team previews. We'll probably just pick a division each day and go through all the teams, make sure you know the fantasy players to know, position battles that could impact your team, and guys to target in deeper leagues. So Ben, without a doubt, let's get into it, and we'll start out in the AL, and we'll start with the big fish, Shui Ohtani. The Angels ended up bringing him in. I know the Giants were interested, I know the Yankees were interested, but he didn't. It seemed like he wanted to be on the West Coast. It seemed like the Angels were the fit that he was interested in. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is a guy who not only is a pitcher, and a very good one, but a guy that hits and hits pretty well, and we'll actually probably see some time at DH. It's unclear about how much that could be, whether that's 2 to 3 days, maybe that's 4 days. That's all kind of up in the air at this point, and probably depends on his success. But Ben, I guess if we're looking at Ohtani, is he a guy that you think should be technically two players, where you have to draft the hitter Ohtani and then the pitcher Ohtani, or do you think it should be a one guy and you have to pay up to get him because you get that pitcher and the hitter? In weekly leagues you have to lock him in at one spot. I mean, kind of what are your thoughts on him and kind of his role in fantasy baseball?
Well, I wrote an article on Ohtani where I touched on these different roles, and it does make a huge difference. It really does, because right now the hitter version, you're not looking at anything that's going to be projected more than your sort of. I've put 300 plate appearances, and I think that might be a ceiling, unless he gets a minor injury that stops him pitching, but they still want him to hit. Maybe then that might be a different matter. But I think generally you're going to be looking at the pitcher, not the hitter. I think that CBS have got it right. CBS are treating him as one guy, but what you have to do is you have to decide on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis, is he your hitter or is he your pitcher? So you can't accumulate stats for him if you put him in the pitcher spot as a hitter and vice versa. Yeah. And I think that's an absolutely great way of doing it, especially in daily leagues. I think in daily leagues that makes Ohtani. I was debating whether or not to call him like a first-round pick, or even like I was thinking. Mm-hmm. Even if he's a top 15 pitcher, does being able to have him as a hitter an extra 2 or 3 days a week make him like Clayton Kershaw level of fantasy value? It's going to be so interesting. And the trouble is for these sites, and I understand why it's so hard for them, because if you're in a dynasty league this year and your site eligibility says that you're drafting Shohei Ohtani for the next possibly 15 years, based on this year's eligibility. So if they change, they can't change their minds, because
No.
that can throw dynasty leagues into such a mess. And I don't even know what I'd do with Ohtani in a dynasty league, because his eligibility is going to be so hit and miss year to year. It's going to be so hard, because they've only got to decide 1 year he's not going to hit because he's got a slight niggle on like his hip or something, and you'll lose his eligibility next year on the hitting. It's so tough. I think he should be treated as one guy in the universe who you have to make the decision. I think weekly leagues, you're generally going to use him as a pitcher, and daily leagues, you'll get that massive bump for him. And in daily leagues, if he's a one-person guy, he really is valuable. You could conceivably make a case for him as your number one overall pick in that format, just because he is going to offer you so much. He potentially can fill 10 categories for you, because he will add a few steals as well. And that's really interesting. I can see why Yahoo have gone. Yahoo have come out and said they're going to have two Ohtanis, one pitcher, one hitter, and CBS have said they're going to have one guy. I can see both sides of the argument. I'm waiting to hear what ESPN say. I hope they go one guy. I think that's the way to do this. I think that's the way that everybody who wants to do this should be treated, and I think we're going to see it a little bit more going forward. These guys that can be flexible, especially guys that can relief pitch and hit, because it just gives you so much more flexibility on your roster.
Yeah, so for me in daily leagues, I'm with you. Like the fact that you can go, okay, he's pitching today, put him in the pitcher slot, and then the rest of the week leave him in your utility slot or DH if you have that. I think that's awesome. I'm not as aggressive as you. There's no way I'm taking him in the first round. But I think he's probably Johnny Cueto as a pitcher, top 15, top 20. I think that sounds fair. And then, if you have a guy that you're using as a, utility infielder or fifth outfielder, I mean, I guess if you combine those, like I'd have to run more data, and I think that's kind of where I'm excited to get the ball rolling now, because we can really get the thoughts going and get the ball rolling. He's probably in a league where you can make daily transactions. He's probably a second rounder for me. In leagues where it's weekly, I'm with you. I think he's basically just a pitcher, unless he has like a 2-start week and then he ends up missing, or he has a really tough matchup. Then maybe I throw him in my hitter slot for a week. But it just I find it hard to do. So he's probably like in the 20s for me if he's just a pitcher.
Yeah, I think correct value as a double up guy is like third round. But I think at the end of the year, I don't think we're going to be sitting down looking at Ohtani's ADP and saying anybody got it right. I really don't. I think it's going to be one of those cases where if you draft him in the first or second round, you're always going to. I think you're always going to look back at the end of the year that you've overdrafted him. You probably haven't, but you'll think you had. And if you get him in the 5th, 6th round as a double up, he's a steal for you. That's absolutely what I think you'll end up the year. I think that 3rd, 4th round is probably going to be right, but I could make the case late first, early second, definitely. Like I said, I joked. I mentioned first overall pick, but I just don't see it.
Yeah.
The other thing to just take into account is there has been this little elbow issue, and the Angels are not going to do anything radical with him this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see them utilize that DL slot for him this year, because he's going to get tired, he's going to get sore. I almost wonder if the slight elbow issue is them already putting out that he's going to end up spending time on the DL this year, because the way they've got him with this, the way that he's come into the league and the control they've got over him is incredible. And they're not going to do anything dangerous. I mean, we were talking about them off air, and they've built a good team. And their team might not challenge this year, but give it a couple of years, add a couple of pieces, they could. And especially as starting pitchers. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think they're going to do anything radical. I think this year you'll be cautious with him, but I wouldn't be surprised this time next year if we're talking about him as a complete bust as a hitter, or if we're talking about him as the 2nd or 3rd overall pick in drafts, because it could go either way. It really could. If he's a valuable pitcher and he can just add you a little bit of hitting in a daily guy, one site, absolutely I could see the case where next year he is challenging Mike Trout to be the number 1 overall pick in fantasy.
Okay, so you're in a draft tomorrow, and you can draft Ohtani as a single player with daily transactions. What round do you start thinking about taking him?
I start considering it in the 2nd round, depending on who I get in the 1st round. I consider it in the 2nd round. I just think I think about it. If I'm at the back end of the second round, I might try and let him slide into the third round. But if I'm at the top end of the second round, if I want him, I'm going to go grab him. I'm not sure, 100% sure yet if I want him. Like,
Yeah.
this is what you said. This is what's brilliant about thinking about it now is my mind's going to change 100 times on this guy between
Mm-hmm.
now and the end of the year. But he signed for the Angels on the basis they were going to let him be a two-way player, and I don't see them going back on that now. I think second round's where I consider him. I think third round's where I'm happy to have taken the gamble on him.
So maybe you take if you're say you're one of the top 2 or 3 picks, maybe you take Kershaw, and then maybe you grab someone else on the way back, and then hope he's there in the third. Or would you be comfortable? Say you take Kershaw, third overall, fourth overall, and on the way back, would you in Ohtani sitting there for you? Is that a decision you make, or because you already have a pitcher, you're looking at another hitter and you're gambling?
Yeah, I think if I've started with Kershaw, I think I'm staying away. If that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. If I've gone starting pitcher in the first 2 rounds, I'm staying away. But what I'd be willing to do is go, let's say Altuve third overall, or
Mm-hmm.
Goldschmidt or Arenado, somewhere in that top 4 or 5. Then come back, grab a late in the second round player, like outfield position player type guy, depending on who I pick the first round. Then on the way back, that's where I say, right, Otani's going to be my number one pitcher, and I can also use him as a hitter.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a daily league, if I'm in a weekly league, it's different. I don't want him just. He drops down because I'm only ever going to use him as a pitcher. I do have concern using him as my number one pitcher. But what I might do then is I might think, right, well, I know I've got two really good players. I can have a little run of starting pitching here and try and get some of those 10 through 30 number starting pitchers. Try and load up on talented guys. That's where I am right now with it. That's the way I'd go. I'd be looking early third round. I'd be absolutely over the moon if I passed on him at the start of the second round and I could grab him late in the third round. I'd be over the moon.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. I think third round where he's not a pitcher, I think or where he is both, and I think if he's like a split player or like a week league where you have to lock him in just as a pitcher, what like fifth, sixth round, I think sounds pretty fair.
Yeah, sounds about right to me.
Let's talk about a couple other moves. The Angels, as we were talking about, kind of have solidified some stuff, and they solidified that infield pretty nicely. They brought over Zach Cozart from the Reds as a free agent. He's going to be playing third base every day for them, and they also brought in Ian Kinsler, which Ian Kinsler. He's not the guy we saw a few years ago that was, an amazing fantasy baseball guy, a guy that was a top 2, 3 round pick, but he's still pretty solid. It looks like he's going to be either hitting 1 or 2 for them, depending on what they do with Mike Trout. Kind of as a whole, what are your thoughts on the Angels' moves and, the potential fantasy bump for kind of all the guys, for Trout, for Justin Upton, who they brought back, for Albert Pujols?
Yeah, I'm very impressed with what the Angels did. I think they made some smart moves. I think Kinsler's a guy that can help them for the next couple of years, but he also is a guy that I think they can move on from. I'm not overly familiar with his contract situation, I have to say, and it's not something I tend to worry myself with. But I think he can be a valuable top of the order guy. I think he can set the table for them. I think Cozart is a good player. I think fantasy wise, I don't see Cozart making a huge splash. I have him outside my top 10 at shortstop, and there's no way he breaks anywhere near that in third base, because third base is so stacked. He's going to be nearer 20 than he is 10 there. Just simply because I think we're looking closer to 20 home runs. I've got him projected at the moment for the same as he did last year, 24, but I've also got him playing 30 more games than he has either of the last 2 years. So I think I'm going to have to dial that projection back a little bit. It's going to see him drop down towards 15 in shortstop and definitely close to 20 at third base. So I don't think he's going to be the most valuable player that you could own right now. Kinsler's definitely interesting. I think he'll have his role. I think he'll score you a lot of runs. If you're looking late in drafts for a second baseman, I think I'd look Kinsler, because I think if I need some runs, that's the way I'd go. If I've absolutely sort of shelved second base, that's not a bad option. He can contribute around that. I mean, we're talking about a guy that hit 20 home runs each of the last 2 years, stole 14 bases each of the last 2 years, stole over 10 bases the last 5 years. I think he can do that again for you. I think he can give you 15 home runs. I'm really optimistic on that. And I think if he bats at the top of that order, 100 runs is definitely on the card. So if you're looking for runs, a bit of late boost of power and steals, Kinsler's the way to go. Just hoping his average can come up from last year. Even if he can get it back into the 260 range, that would be important. I think the moves are great for Trout. I think Kinsler setting the table in front of him is great. I think for Upton, it's wonderful. And Pujols again. For Pujols and Calhoun, it also ups their run numbers because all of a sudden you've got Cozart batting at 6, driving them in. Simmons is the guy I think who loses out a bit. I think we see him lose some plate appearances from last year. I mean, he was a good shortstop last year, but I think he struggles this year batting at 7. I think if those guys stay healthy above him, and you can question that with Kinsler and obviously with Pujols, I don't see him putting up the season he did last year. And I think he will be the biggest casualty from last year's offense. I still think Simmons will be a good draft in fantasy baseball just because I think he can play like, I wouldn't surprise me if he played 180 games in a year if they could do it. Like he's quite a durable guy, and they'll always have him in the lineup for his defensive abilities. But I just think last year he got time nearer the top of the order. I don't see it happening so much this year.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way unless Kinsler goes down or something. But he was awesome. He's a guy that kind of struggled, and then he finally got his shot up and near the top, and he was awesome last year. He's probably gonna be a guy I'm avoiding. I'm with you. I think he takes a major step back. I guess my big question is, does Cozart, gaining that third base eligibility make him more interesting just because of the flexibility he'll provide to you?
Yeah, it does. It becomes a decision maker. But if I just look where I've got him ranked 11. I've got Asdrubal Cabrera, Marwin Gonzalez, and Javier Baez in the same tier as him, and I've got Jose Peraza and Trevor Story. So the only guy there, other than Cozart, who doesn't have multi-positional eligibility is Trevor Story. Cozart at that point only has shortstop. So Peraza can do second and short. Ascap can do second base, third base, and shortstop, and Marwin can do everything. And Baez again is second base and shortstop. So I think Cozart's eligibility probably keeps him in there with Peraza because that corner infield, middle infield thing comes into play, and it probably keeps him above Javier Baez. But he probably does slide below Cabrera and Marwin Gonzalez for me. Shortstop's an interesting position this year because I could make a case for drafting Orlando Arcia and Paul Young, who I actually didn't rank this time. And I could also make a case for drafting Anderson Simmons. All of those three were sort of 20 B, C, and D after Tim Anderson and Addison Russell. So it's an interesting position. And Zach Cozart might be a guy that if I don't go early at the position, I wait on and see if I can get value on him because of that flexibility in your middle infield, corner infield slots.
Yeah, and he's also going to be hitting 6th in this lineup, which I don't know that I love. When you have guys like that, it's all about getting those at bats. So let's keep moving. Let's talk about another big fish. This one swam upstream from Florida, from the Miami Marlins to the New York Yankees. I thought the Giants, I'm a Giants fan. I thought we had a legit shot. I thought we had a great job of getting this guy. Supposedly he was a Dodgers fan growing up, so he can't play for the Giants. I don't know. It's some bullshit if you ask me. But Giancarlo Stanton is headed to the New York Yankees. I guess, he was incredible last year, Ben, but this is a guy that he doesn't play, every game. He has had, injury issues. Production issues. He did play 159 games last year, which was incredible. But the years before, 119, 74, 145, 116, 123. I mean, you have to go back to 2011 where he played 150 games again. And I know he's incredible when he plays, but the injury risk is there. I guess, what were your initial thoughts when you saw that he was going to the Yankees, and kind of what are your expectations for 2018?
Well, I think Derek Jeter doing the Yankees a favor was my first initial thought there. Like, way to help your old team rebuild, and to just get back what they did is a bit of a joke. But on the fantasy baseball side of it, it's obviously going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to watch more Yankees baseball this year than I probably ever have because you're going to turn on the TV to watch that lineup, aren't you? Gardner, Judge, Stanton. It's just
Judge,
not,
Stanton, and
Sanchez. I mean,
Sanchez,
it's crazy.
yeah.
Like
that could be like 140 home runs right there.
I mean, realistically, they could all hit 50 home runs and you wouldn't be stunned. Like that's how mental it is.
Mm-hmm.
if you promised me that Stanton was going to play 159 games again, he'd probably be my number two outfielder after Mike Trout, because there's every chance if he plays 159 games, he gets close to 60 home runs again, and
Hmm.
that's mental. Because you look at 2015 when he played for the Marlins, 74 games, 318 at bats or plate appearances, sorry, and 27 home runs. Double
Yeah.
that up, that was his 59 pretty much. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And I mean, the Marlins were good, but they weren't great. This guy had 123 runs and 132 RBI. Like,
Hmm.
that is insane. And then to add on top of just even two steals and a 280 average, he's not repeating that, unfortunately. I
No.
just can't see it. The home runs I can see, but the average will drop. I think the runs and RBI could well and truly still be there. But I'm not going to be as bullish on other people in projecting him games. I was thinking like a 140. I've
Hmm.
projected him 130 actually, and with that, I've put him as my number four outfielder. So I feel like that's a fair compromise. I feel like you know what you're doing if you draft Giancarlo Stanton. If you at the back end of the first, early second round want to take that gamble on Stanton, by all means, go for it. It's not a bad call. 50 home runs does feel like what you'd expect if he plays 130, 140 games. It really does. And
Hmm.
anything you get over that is a bonus.
It feels aggressive to me. I'm gonna have to push back a little bit. Um, I I think like I'm looking at his 2014 numbers. He played 145 games, which feels about right. He had 37 homers and 105 RBIs in this lineup. In that park, maybe it's 42 homers and 115 RBI. Like I think that's kind of what you should be kind of expecting as a ceiling, to be honest. And then obviously he has the ability to go over that. But I wouldn't expect that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, also it's not often on this podcast I get made to feel old because I'm generally the youngest on here, but he's 2 years younger than me. That really upsets me. Like makes me wonder why my parents didn't put a baseball bat in my hand. But I mean, he's a different guy to what he was
It's
in
because you're
2014.
not 6'6" and 250 pounds.
I could have been with the right moves. He's a different guy to what he was in 2014. He stole 13 bases then. That
Yeah,
that just tells you that the body type was slightly different. I,
yeah.
I, I believe since then we've had the hit to the face and we've had all of the stuff that happened. I don't think he plays 150 games. I don't think he plays 140 games. I've projected him for 130, and
Yeah.
with that, I can tell you now that I've projected him for. I'm just pulling up the numbers. I've projected him for 43 home runs. That feels about right to me at 130. Anything 140 plus, and I think you get to close to your 50 home runs. I'm drafting him. I'm drafting as my fourth outfielder. The only other guy I can make a case to who I've ranked behind him is Mookie Betts. But Giancarlo Stanton, he's the guy I'm gonna gamble on if I'm in that position. If you put him there and you can tick home runs off for a few rounds, you really can. Like it's such an advantage. So it's a
I
good move.
guess
I
I guess I just we saw all the power numbers jump up again last year, and I feel like I don't know. Like he's definitely a guy that I think someone else will draft before I'm comfortable taking him. Because
yeah, probably.
I think 130 something games seems right. I think it's closer to 40 45 home runs and 100 110 RBI, which is still incredible. Don't get me wrong, and probably worthy of a first second round pick. But I don't know. Something's holding me back just a little bit.
I think we can all accept that he struggled a little bit in 2016. He had his worst year for slugging. If I find his ISO numbers, they were down that year. They were down to sort of 250. Either side of that, he said 340 ISO numbers. So it might be that we're about to see some sort of pattern, but I've just done a quick calculation, and if you take 2016's numbers up to the amount of players he had in 2017, you get about 40 home runs. So we're in the right ballpark. I just think that to have that potential is worth the risk.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're crazy. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Where are you at with Aaron Judge? This is a guy we saw tail off. I mean, he hit 185 in August. Obviously, backed it up in a little bit in September, hitting up again 311. Um, the power numbers dipped a little bit, but then he ended up hitting 15 homers in September, and then having kind of finishing pretty strong and looked good in the playoffs. Is he a guy you expect to be pretty dang solid next year, especially either hitting before or after Stanton, and kind of is he a guy that's going to be in that first, second, third round conversation?
Yeah, he's gonna be. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go third round for him probably rather than second round, just because I think people did figure him out as the year went on, and I think people are gonna keep figuring him out. I'm just looking at the walk rate. It was relatively high at nearly 20%, and that's not going to happen this year. People aren't going to walk him as much because walking him, I think he was batting behind Gary Sanchez most of last year. Walking him generally brought up not a very good hitter. Let's say Todd Frazier, who wasn't going to destroy you on a regular basis. Frazier's good, but he's not great. Walking him now is going to bring up Stanton. It's not going to happen. So he's going to see more pitches. So
Yeah.
which probably means we're going to see more strikeouts. So when you look at it that way, there is problems there. But I'm him and Bellinger are both the same for me. That I have my concerns that you might see a bit of a drop off this year, and that they will both be overdrafted.
Yeah.
I'm going to go as far as to say I won't own either of them this year because I'm not going to be bullish enough on them. But I'm going to make a projection that in 2019 I own a lot of them because I think they're going to have a drop off. What's going to happen is their value is going to deflate into the sort of the fourth, fifth round. And I think that's when you're going to see them start to come back up. So I think this year they're going to be a guy who's overdrafted, but not by a huge amount. Just by I think they will. I think people will draft Aaron Judge in the second round this year. I really do. I think people will draft Aaron Judge before Giancarlo Stanton. I think that is wrong. I think people will draft Judge over Betts. I can see people doing it over Harper. Can't see it over Blackman, but I can see it over those three, and I think they will make a mistake.
Oh yeah, I think Blackman. I think over Blackman too. People don't like Blackman. It's just. He's not sexy, doesn't hit 50 bombs. I don't know. If I'm drafting one of them, taking Bellinger over Judge. But yeah, I could see both that. And you know what? If come June, July, around All-Star break, if Bellinger's dropped off, he's the guy I'm trading for in Dynasty Leagues and trying to get as many shares as I can. Let's keep it moving. Let's talk about Dee Gordon. He's on the move. He's not only moving teams, but he's moving positions. He's heading to the Seattle Mariners. He's going to play center field for them. The good thing is, for at least for this season, he will be second base eligible. I guess kind of what do you expect from him in Seattle in front of that lineup with Robinson Cano and Nelson Cruz and Kyle Seager? It seems like a good golden opportunity for him to have a big season.
Yeah, I think a little bit because it feels like middle infield and second base is so strong that I kind of feel like his value, I don't want to say it's depressed a little bit, but what's kind of happened is Altuve has taken second base to a new level.
Yeah.
Like he's taken second base and he's jumped streets ahead. It used to be, we discussed, it was Altuve, Gordon, and Cano, all in a kind of group together. What saves Dee Gordon's fantasy value massively this year is this move to center field. He's still hitting at the top of an order, and now he's going to give you second base, so obviously middle infield, and outfield eligibility. I can see that being huge. I see him stealing a lot of bases. I see him getting on base a lot in front of some very good hitters. That's the key thing. You've got Segura, Cano, Cruz, Seager, Haniger. Even if a few of them fail, there's still talent there. I wrote about Dee Gordon. I think he's gonna be okay. I think let's look. Every time he's played 140 plus games, he stole 50 bases pretty much. So I think that's the number to look at is 50 bases. I would like to see a little more power, but that ship has sailed, and Seattle's not the place to recover that. My big concern is that if you draft Dee Gordon, this is what you're faced with. 2016, 47 runs, 14 RBI. 2017, 114 runs, 33 RBI. That's not going to cut the mustard. And I mean, it might be better this year because he's hitting behind guys like Ben Gamel and Ryan Healy, as opposed to whatever rubbish Miami were trotting out the last couple of years. But I do have my concerns that with Dee Gordon, you're sacrificing not just one category in your power, but you're sacrificing your RBI as well. And that's where the value has to be right for Dee Gordon. And I don't know right now where that value will feel right to me, because I feel like second base is so loaded behind him with Jose Ramirez, Cano, Jonathan Scoop, Brian Dozier, Daniel Murphy, even Whit Merrifield, Starlin Castro, and DJ LeMahieu, to example. That's the top 10. Like, I feel like the value is never going to be right for him. And I feel like I can get my steals somewhere else. I feel like I can gamble on Jose Peraza later in drafts to get a few steals. I can get my steals at outfield. I don't know if I'm going to be the guy again drafting Dee Gordon, just because I think he's going to be so overvalued when he doesn't help you in a couple of categories.
I'm going to be in on Dee Gordon. I think I'm going to be on Dee Gordon big time. I guess my big concern is that if he comes up and, if Segura's behind him, then he has a good chance of actually trying to steal bases. But if he comes up in a key spot with, and Segura strikes out or something, Robinson Cano's coming up or Nelson Cruz is coming up, and, they're going to obviously send him on, he could do a lot of first to third type stuff. I don't know how much actual stealing he'll do, and that scares me a little bit. But I think you draft Gordon, you hope for 50, 60 steals, you hope for 100-plus runs, you hope for a decent enough average, and then you pencil in the homers and the RBIs at other positions. And, last year I had homers and RBIs in bunches on teams that didn't do great. So I think I'm going to be in on steals, and I can put together power later. But we'll have to see. Let's talk about Ryan Healy really quick. I think he's an interesting move, obviously, in the trade from the A's. A guy that flashed a little bit last year. Obviously, hitting ninth isn't ideal. But is he a guy in deeper formats in, AL only that could make sense for you?
Yeah, he's certainly a guy that interests me. Yeah, it's going to be AL only because he's hitting ninth in that lineup. But if he does well and you get, let's say, an injury to Kyle Seager, an injury to Nelson Cruz, it's possible. Nelson Cruz feels like he's 100. He's only going to be 38, but he feels a lot older than that. There's every possibility that Healy moves up that order. He's a decent hitter. He hit 25 home runs last year in 150 games. I feel like we could get that again from him. He's first base and third base eligible, which is always a bonus, and he's going to play a lot at first base this year. In AL only, he's a really, really solid pick. In mixed leagues, I don't see him being drafted, but I see him being a guy that's going to be there when you gamble on Rhys Hoskins, you gamble on Trey Mancini, maybe you gamble on Matt Olson and Joey Gallo. When they start to fall apart, Ryan Healy's going to be right there with open arms, ready to embrace you.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. Let's throw out a couple other names and as we get ready to move on. Gerrit Cole headed to the Houston Astros. I think, obviously we'll be talking about McCutchen on the NL podcast. Make sure you check that out. But Gerrit Cole is headed to the Houston Astros. I guess, do you think he's the ace there? Like, are you excited about him on that team? Do you worry about him in that park? Kind of where are you at?
Well, Verlander's the ace. He's absolutely the ace. I agree with what a lot of people are saying, that pitch for pitch, innings for innings, Gerrit Cole is not going to be the guy that he was in Pittsburgh, because he's not going to be like the star. And maybe that'll be good for him, because he's carried Pittsburgh. And that must be hard as a pitcher, to know you are what Pittsburgh is hinging wins on, because you are their starting pitcher. It'll be nice for him. He's going to pitch, well, I hope he's going to pitch 200 innings, because not many other people in the Astros are going to that are not called Justin Verlander, so they need him to.
Yeah.
The thing that worries me is, let's just look at his trend here. So 2014, 138 innings. 2015, 208. 2016, 116. 2017, 203. Screams of an injury to me. Screams that we could have problems. What's positive is we saw the strikeout rate bounce back last year. What's less positive is he had 1.37 home runs per 9. That's bad, really bad. And going to the Astros probably isn't going to fix that. Now, the advantage is that he's going to get more wins. He got 12 wins last year. But saying that, how many more wins is he going to get? So is it going to be enough to offset the fact that actually maybe he might have a worse ERA than he had last year? I'm a big Gerrit Cole fan. I was last year. I'm stuck with him on a dynasty or keeper league team for a year because I gave him a 3 year or 2 year contract last year, which is now looking silly. Um, I think he can be good. I think he'll be a valuable pitcher, but I don't know if top 20 is where I'd be drafting him. It's where I hope he ends up, but I'd be hoping to get him maybe more in the top 30 as a third pitcher or a late second pitcher, early third pitcher. That's my problem with him is I don't know if I trust him A to have the innings and B to give the results. I'm hoping that the Astro staff can do some of the magic they've done with others with him, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little more optimistic. I think 20 wins is definitely in the realm of outcomes. I think knowing that he has Carlos Correa and Altuve and the boppers in that lineup, where if he gives up a run or two, it's not going to be the end of the world. Where there'd be some games when he's pitching for the Pirates, and if he gave up 2 runs, through 7, there's a shot there, like a decent shot. The Pirates just don't win that game. So having that ability, I think, is going to be good for him. Obviously, games against like teams like the A's will be nice. We'll see how the Angels and Mariners are. They've been hot and cold at times. I don't know. I'm excited for him. I think there is potential. I think honestly, I know Verlander was great last year, but I think he's the best pitcher in this rotation. If he can be solid, Verlander is good. We'll be able to break this team down a lot more when we do our AOS preview. But I have high expectations. The
The
Pirates.
hilarity of this is that last year I was trying to talk you into Gerrit Cole while you were trying to
Yeah.
talk me out of Gerrit Cole, and we've done a complete switch here. I remember at one stage passive aggressively writing Gerrit Cole's stats down on a piece of paper and sending it to you in a picture and saying, "Really, this is a bad pitcher."
Yeah, well, the times they are a changing, and I like him in this lineup, or on this team, with that lineup behind him, and I think good things are coming. Let's talk about the Pirates Hall quickly. Michael Feliz, Colin Moran, Joe Musgrove. Do you think any of these guys have the ability to be fantasy baseball impact players?
The only way that Feliz might be is kind of as that super reliever role in deep roto leagues. I don't believe he's going to get the saves in Pittsburgh, but he might be in with a shot at some point, and that will be where he will become interesting. Colin Moran is currently penciled in to be the starting third baseman, but I he's going to be in a platoon at the moment. He's going to be a guy in NL only, I would consider, but he
Yeah.
also is a guy I could see being mixed league relevant. He did hit 18 home runs last year in AAA, but he bombed the year before in AAA. So it's going to be interesting. He is only 25, so you can forgive bombing at the age of 23 and bouncing back at the age of 24. Definitely, it's something that I could see. This guy was a big prospect, and
Hmm.
he lost his prospect status partly because he got blocked because Alex Bregman was a better prospect in a way.
Hmm.
I feel like we might have seen him in 2016, even despite his bad year in AAA, if it hadn't been for Bregman, and it hadn't been for the Gurriel and guys like that. So
Hmm.
I do think there's a chance he gives you something, and I mean, let's say plays 100 games, and let's be optimistic and say he hits 15 home runs. There's a possibility that might happen. It's a small possibility, but it could happen. That would interest me definitely.
Yeah, he feels like a guy that like March or like May June we're writing in a free agency waiver wire column saying pick this guy up. The Pirates are a team I think
Yeah,
that has a shot to lose 90 to 100 games, and I think Colin Moran, Josh Bell, these young kids are going to be a big part of what they're going to be doing, and they're going to give them their shot to not only play every day, but to struggle and when things get better and they start hitting better and all of a sudden they start producing, become guys that us fantasy owners want to take a look at.
yeah. I mean, I'm just having a look now, and David Freese is the guy he's in a platoon with. Now,
Yeah.
if they're sub 500, not making the playoffs, are they going to keep trotting David Freese out there when they're not going to learn a lot from
No.
seeing David Freese versus seeing Colin Moran? So they might protect him initially against lefties, but majority of pitchers are righties, and I think he'll start a lot of games, even if he comes out late in games. So he's definitely a guy. I think you're right. I think come May or June, he will appear in a free agent column, and we won't bat an eyelid.
Yep. Last guy I want to throw out before we get out of here, Randall Grichuk, headed to the Blue Jays. the Cardinals are moving outfielders, making room for something. But Grichuk in Toronto, I guess. Do you think he has a chance to be an everyday player there? And um, this is a guy that we've kind of been waiting to be something, and he's kind of shown us flashes, but never consistent enough for people to get excited about. And I remember him and Piscotty were a big battle last year, and now they're both gone. I mean, I guess what are you doing with Grichuk heading into 2018?
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because he he went from being a bit part player, and so he wasn't even sort of in my considerations, and now all of a sudden he's a guy that's not quite gonna creep into the bottom of my rankings. I'm just having a look who's down there, and he's not far off, but he's definitely jumped back into consideration. So guys I have in and around him, like for example, I ranked low end like Ian Desmond and people like that, because I'm just not sure what to expect from them. And Grichuk's got every possibility of hitting 20, 25 home runs. My concern is he's never played more than 132 games. 478 plate appearances is our previous high that we've seen from him. If he can get that over 500, I see 25 home runs as a possibility. I see him as being a good source of late power. What we want to avoid is that 230, 240 batting average, but I think that's the Grichuk that we might see. Now, the ballpark is going to benefit him. Toronto is a better ballpark to hit in for sure. So I'm definitely interested by this. He's definitely jumped back onto my radar. He's going to be a fifth outfielder for me in some leagues this year. If I just need a little power boost at the end, and I'm always guilty of not having enough average on my team. So this might be another guy that suckers me in right at the end of a draft.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that if I'm doing a draft and he's still floating around in the late stages, he's a guy I'll throw on my bench and see what happens. If a month in I realize he's not getting enough at bats or it's just not hitting well enough, then a guy I'll be comfortable moving on. But the upside is definitely there, and in Toronto it could be really interesting. Awesome, Ben. This was a lot of fun. Obviously, we'll be back to talk National League. Make sure you check that out. Make sure you check our free agency podcast, which I'm sure three of the guys we'll be discussing will sign contracts as soon as we're done on teams that we didn't discuss him going to. So we'll be back with that. We'll be back with team previews, all that good stuff. Make sure you're checking out Fake Pigskin all the time. Ben's stuff is going up. I will have stuff up very soon. But for Ben Rolfe, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.